how to stop election sabotage by observing the vote count with our special guest, the scrutineers. This election cycle, we are encouraging our coalition members to participate in election protection, and observing the vote count is an important role in the certification process. And so now I'm going to pass this over to Emily Levy, who is going to take it over from the scrutineers. Thank you for joining us, Emily.
Thank you so much, Ashley and Diana, for hosting us. And thanks to all of you who are here and anyone who watches this on the recording. Like Ashley said, I'm Emily Levy. I'm the founder and executive director of scrutineers.org, which is a nonpartisan national online community dedicated to the freedom to vote and to elections that are transparent, so every voice is heard. And I started working in election protection back in the aftermath of the 2004 election. And then fast forward, what is that, 16 years, I founded Scrutineers in January of 2020, because there wasn't a place for people to go who were concerned about our election systems and transparency and security of our election and wanted to do something to help increase the trustworthiness of our elections. A lot of people don't know that there are actually actions we can take individually and in small groups that make our elections more transparent and more secure. So I'll tell you a little bit more about scrutineers at the end of this presentation, but I just want to jump right in. The presentation is a little bit over a half an hour, so we should have time for a Q&A at the end. If you want to put questions into the chat during, go ahead. I may or may not see them. It's kind of hard for me to present and watch the chat at the same time. So if you think you'll remember them, maybe hold off till the end. So I know that there are a lot of places you could be today. It's a really busy time a week before the election, and I really appreciate that you chose to be here with us, learning about how you can help stop election sabotage by becoming a vote count observer. And I promise to give you all that I can in this short time that we have together, and also to tell you how you can go deeper with the topics we're going to cover today. You know, a lot of people think that elections are pretty simple. People vote, the votes get counted, and the winners are announced. But the more you learn about elections, the more you'll understand just how complicated they are and how hard it is to get them right. The people who run elections have really challenging jobs, especially now when they're under attack by people who don't want every voice to be heard. Most of the people running elections believe in democracy and the right to vote and are doing their best, and I hope we'll still be able to say that by the next election. Today's training is part of Scrutineers After Project, which stands for Act for Trusted Election Results. And we know that many people who care deeply about elections are really busy right now, doing get out the vote work, making sure everybody's got a plan to vote and all that. And we'll be busy right up until polls close on election night. So I'm curious if any of you who are on the call are doing activities now, like getting out the vote or campaigning for a candidate. Go ahead and type into the chat what you're doing so we can thank you for it. And so you also may vote early. So that's another thing that may be happening in the next week if it hasn't already. And again, those are activities that happen before Election Day. On Election Day, the activities change to voting if you haven't yet, perhaps working the polls or serving as a poll watcher. And get out the vote work continues throughout the day. So someone who at Democracy Initiative says working to get out the vote, great. So our focus today is what happens after the voting, starting when polls close on election night and on the days and possibly even a couple of weeks that follow. Until the election is certified and any audits are complete. So we're going to teach you about how you can help ensure that the votes are counted fairly and accurately by observing at your local election office or vote counting center. We need volunteers to do this all over the country in communities large and small. Some observers are only able to work once for a couple of hours, and then there are others that will show up day after day, all the way up until the results are certified. And that generally happens about a week a couple weeks after voting ends. So however much time you have that you can devote to this is great. And I found that a lot of times election offices are actually open and doing this work evenings and weekends as well. So for those of you who may not be available during weekdays, that doesn't mean that you can't do this work. You may still be able to. I've noticed that it's quite common for dedicated people to work really hard leading up to an election and sometimes on election day, and then go home and wait for the results, often feeling like they wish there was something more that they can do to make a difference. And I'm here to tell you that there is something more you can do, and it's really important. So here's what we're going to cover today. We'll talk about what happens after voting ends, why it's important to observe, what to expect when you arrive to observe, what you'll see and what to look for, where to report any problems you come across, and then a little bit on how to prepare and kind of the next steps to get going with this. People do this kind of observation without any training at all, and you may find that people crowd into election offices just because it feels like the place to be, even though they have no idea what to do. And it's really important that we come together to make sure that votes are counted fairly and accurately. The more you know, the more effective you'll be. So I'm really glad that you're here today. There's a lot of information in this training, so you may want to take notes, but we're also going to share with you a link at the end to a page that has a recording of a previous time we presented this training, and the transcript of the training, as well as some of the other resources that I mentioned in the call today. So if you'd rather just watch and listen and not take notes, that's cool, because you'll have access to all of it to refer back to. So what does happen after voters leave the polls? At polling places, can we have the next slide? Thanks. At polling places, poll workers have procedures to follow to close up shop. And while you might be able to observe at a polling place on election night, in most cases, we find that it's most useful to observe at the election office or wherever the votes are coming in from the polling places and any drop boxes and being processed. Throughout this processing, election workers have to make sure that they don't lose ballots or double count ballots or permit ballots to be changed or let anyone tamper with the election computers. So I have a question for you, and I'm going to ask you to type into the chat, which is, how accurate do you think, let's see, I have it set up as a poll, but we're a small enough group. I think we'll just go ahead and use the chat instead of the polling feature. How accurate do you think election workers will be in doing their jobs? So do you think they'll all be completely accurate, or most will be accurate, or they'll all make mistakes because they're human and humans make mistakes? Or do you think that some or most of them will be intentionally unfair to one side or the other? So in your own words, how, oh, and Diana says, from my previous question, recruiting folks for election protection training and signing up to serve as poll workers. Fantastic. So how accurate do you think election workers will be on the whole at doing their jobs? 80%. Mostly it will be accurate. Anybody else? What does your gut say about it? Depends on the state and whether they mandate training for all poll workers. Yeah, I was shocked to find out that there are states that don't train poll workers. When I've been a poll worker, I've been trained, and it was still really hard to do. Well, what we found delivering this training over and over for the last several months is that almost nobody says, maybe one person said once that they thought that all of the workers would be completely accurate. People tend to think that either some or all will make mistakes, which is understandable, because poll workers and election workers are human. So let's talk about the three major reasons why it's important to observe. We just talked about the first one briefly, to catch mistakes. Election offices are often underfunded and understaffed. And that makes it even harder for workers to get things right. And if you think about a job that you've had where you were expected to do more than you could possibly do well, you probably felt the urge to cut corners. Observers being present while the votes are counted will help workers resist any urges like that and make sure that procedures are being performed well. So even if you meet somebody who says, oh, I don't have time to go to the training, but yeah, I don't know, would it still be useful for me to observe? The answer is yes, because simply by being there, watching, they will lead the workers to do a better job. Number two is to get problems corrected. If you see problems, you may actually be able to get corrected, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, including who to talk to get issues addressed. And then reason number three is that observers help protect election workers from false allegations. We've seen what can happen when lies are circulated about stolen elections, and your factual documentation of what happened may be really helpful if false allegations occur. Many election workers will recognize this and welcome you. And then there's a fourth reason that's actually not on this slide, which is that by observing, you will help check up on whether observers' rights are being honored or not. And that's really important for us to use those rights so we don't lose them. So it's important that you observe as accurately as you can. You will be the eyes of the public. And as an observer, you can help increase public confidence in the fairness of the elections process. Now, like I said, Scrutineers is a nonpartisan organization, and in most places you can observe from a nonpartisan perspective. In other places, you have to sign up with a party or a candidate to observe. And we hope that even if you're observing on behalf of a party or candidate, you will be really objective in your observation and documentation. The number of observers present at a counting center can really vary quite a bit. And so we strongly recommend that you find a buddy to go with. You will be able to compare notes and make decisions together, and you can even observe different stations in the room. There are usually multiple stations in the room doing different tasks at the same time. And if you can recruit a team of people to go with you, you can coordinate so that you cover as many days as possible, because probably not everybody will be able to go every day. So I'm going to tell you a story now. This is a real life example of observers making a difference. In the California primary election in 2016, observers were watching vote processing in Los Angeles County. And in California, the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party allows independent voters to vote in their primary. But they have to use special ballots called crossover ballots. And election workers were incorrectly processing these crossover ballots in a way that was not counting the votes for president. Now, why did people choose to vote in that primary? Because they wanted to vote for president, and their votes just were not being counted. And the observers were able to briefly get the vote count stopped while the supervisor figured out what to do. And the supervisor agreed that it had been an error and corrected the procedure, including going back over the ballots that had been processed incorrectly. And as a result, an estimated 66,500 votes for president were counted that would not have been counted if those observers hadn't been there. 66,500 votes in one county. So it could be you who prevents a huge mistake like that in this election. Even when problems are corrected, it's important that you document what happened, and in some cases even share it with others, which we'll talk about later on. First, I want to go through the steps involved in doing the actual observing. And we're going to use as an example, observing the arrival and initial processing of votes. So this is what begins on election night after the polls close. So there's early votes and mail votes that come in before that. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but a lot of this applies to that as well. So the initial processing of votes continues at least into the following day, sometimes longer in large jurisdictions. And if you won't be able to observe until later in the week, you'll be watching other parts of the process, but most of what I'm going to talk about will still apply. And we have resources available about observing other election processes that I will show you how to get later. Whenever possible, we recommend that you find out what processes will be happening on the day or days that you can observe, so you can go over our training materials beforehand. And they're actually, in most cases, pretty brief. It won't take you very long to go over them, but we just don't want you to have to learn about all the different things that you could possibly be watching if you're only going to be watching one specific thing. So we'll talk about how to do that later also. When you arrive anywhere to observe, you may need to sign in. We recommend that you introduce yourself to a staff person and ask who to pose any questions to. It's important to stay respectful and be thoughtful about not taking too much of staff's time, because they are extremely busy during this process. Ask the staff if you may take photos and video. That we also recommend that you know the answer to that question in advance. And so we'll be talking about resources to get that question answered. But so this question to ask them is partly to make sure that they know what the rules are about that. Greet other observers you see, and as the day goes on, see if you can make allies of them. While you're observing, this is hugely important, take notes. Notes will help you remember what you see to discuss with others. And it's important that you write your notes right away, since something else may happen a few minutes or an hour later that make it hard to remember the details of what happened before. We have a form that you can print out to use to take notes on, or you can use notebook paper. We also actually have an online form if you'd rather type them on your phone. The main things that are important to write down are names of people involved in the situation, or if you can't get their names, a physical description of them, and the date and time and what happened. If you write your opinions down, which is fine to do, just make sure that you make it clear what's opinion and what's fact. And even if you don't know what the people you're watching should be doing, watching and listening will teach you. And there's sort of a general rule that makes it easier, I think, to do this work for the first time, which is you will see the flow of activity through the room. You'll see when a batch of ballots is brought in to be processed, where it goes first and what happens at the first table and where it's taken next, and what happens next. And so what you're going to be looking for is both, does the process itself, does that flow make sense and look like it's secure and things like that? And also, are there any exceptions? Are there, is there a batch of ballots that oddly heads off in a different direction from all the others? So you're going to be looking to establish what the patterns are and see if there are any interruptions in those patterns. Video is by far the best way to document what you see, though it may not be allowed. And one of the things about video that can be cool is sometimes it picks up things in the background that you didn't even see, and later you notice them on the video. If video is not allowed, you may be able to take an audio recording. Most cell phones likely have an audio recording app. And if you don't have one, you could download one in advance. So on election night at the central counting facility, you can expect to see staff receiving and opening boxes or bags of ballots and probably feeding them through a high-speed scanner to be counted. And most places close down any drop boxes when the polls close and bring bags of ballots from the drop boxes as well. And these may be processed later than other ballots. So that just may be part of the flow, is that those are processed later. Some votes will arrive on a memory device like a thumb or flash drive. And the reason for this is why that's not everywhere is that in some places ballots are scanned at the voting location, at the polling place. So then they've got both the paper ballots and the electronic results that are on a thumb or flash drive to transport back to the elections offices. And then in other places, the votes are only counted at the central office, so they'll bring back in the paper ballots, but there won't be that thumb drive. If there are thumb drives, they might arrive inside the scanner, inside the actual machinery, or inside a bag or box or envelope. Staff will then take them out of wherever they are and put them into the central equipment to upload the information. And then you'll want to watch where they go after that, where the staff put these small thumb drives. And then you may also see the election results being transferred to the public website. And so here are some examples of what to look for while you're watching this process. Many places require that 2 people bring in each ballot box, and this is for security reasons. So note if you see anyone bringing in election materials unaccompanied. Do ballots and memory devices arrive sealed? The seals usually have numbers on them, and workers may have a list of seal numbers. So before opening the seals, do the staff check the seal number against the list? We have some additional training material about locks and seals for those who kind of wonder how secure are they really. There's some that are designed to be tamper-proof, which generally aren't. And there are some that are designed to be tamper evident, which means if they've been opened, you'll be able to tell. And they are absolutely not foolproof in either case. So if you want to geek out on locks and seals, we've got a bunch of information for you on that. So how do they track ballot? I have a hard time saying this. Batches of ballots to ensure that each batch is scanned once and that none is scanned more than once. And usually part of that process, like I said, is moving them to different parts of the room, and they may also be sealed before they're moved. If the place where you are scans ballots in the precincts and results arrive on memory devices, like I said, these are small and not very noticeable, so they're really hard to track. How do you think the procedure is of tracking them, of handling them so nobody can substitute one for another or miss one or double count one? Then, do workers from the voting computer companies, often referred to as vendors, access the election system? If staff can't keep track of what the vendors are doing, or if the software changes during the election, this is really dangerous. And it's good to write down anything done by vendor representatives. So ask what they're doing, ask their name. If they won't give you their name, write down a physical description of what they look like. When workers are done with the materials, which could be at the end of an activity or at the end of the day, how are those materials stored and locked? Write down what you notice. Now I want to talk a little bit about the question of whether voting systems are connected to the internet. You've probably heard in the news, there's no need to worry about elections being hacked because voting systems aren't connected to the internet. But is it true? Almost all computers get security updates for their software from the internet. These are loaded onto USB drives or CDs. And if these updates contain malware, that goes into the election computers and infects them. Also, some of the voting systems now in use connect to the internet to send vote totals to the central office. But even when a particular computer isn't internet connected, it's not necessarily safe from hacking because it's indirectly connected to the internet. So let me explain. On the left, we've got an offline computer. This is where the vote counts from the precincts are being fed in on those thumb drives, like I said. And if you've ever watched election night coverage on TV, you've heard them update the totals to say things like, with 47% of the precincts reporting, Joe Schmo is leading in such and such a county by this percent. So you're getting gradual updates on the vote count. And every half hour or so, in order to create those gradual updates, staff are moving partial results from this offline election computer to an online computer represented on the right here to post on their website, send to the state office, send to news agencies, etc. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do this transferring. Let's say the results from the offline computer are loaded onto a flash drive. And this is then inserted into the online computer system used to transmit results. That's an online computer, and malware from the internet can rapidly infect it and even create false results. This malware could infect that flash drive that's inserted into the computer. And they often put the same flash drive back into the election computer for the next update. So malware can follow the USB back into the election computer. That's the wrong way to do it. But because this is how it's often done, it's really misleading to say that the election computer cannot be manipulated because it's not connected to the internet. My colleague Marilyn Marks, who's the executive director of the Coalition for Good Governance in Georgia, says this is like sharing needles, and I agree. The best practice is for each update to be performed using a single-use CD or a new USB drive fresh from a factory sealed package. So if you see this sharing needles problem, please make sure to put it in your notes. So now let's talk about reporting any problems that come up. You'll need to use your own judgment about who it makes sense to tell about a specific situation, as we can't possibly talk about everything that could come up. So we'll give you some questions to think about. Who or what is causing the problem? Does action need to be taken immediately to correct the problem? Sometimes it's a problem that really just needs to be addressed before the next election. Who has the power to correct it? And is this something that needs outside intervention from a hotline, a party, or a candidate? When you arrive to observe, remember you ask the staff who you should speak to if you have questions. So if you see a problem, you're going to want to talk to that person immediately, and they may have a perfectly reasonable explanation of why something happened. Often, especially for folks who are new at this work, and this is one of the things that's actually really tricky about training people to do it, is that there are things that people think are problems that actually are fine. And there are things that people think are fine that actually are problems. So you're going to want to, approach the worker with curiosity and hear what they have to say about what's going on. Consider comparing notes with other observers in the room, which might include your buddy, or it could include candidates or their representatives. And if it still seems to be a problem, one of the resources we have available is called CSAY 2022. And it puts issues on a map so that other observers and journalists can see if there's a problem. This image of the CSAY map on the slide is from their 2020 map. And so they're just getting started with the 2022 site, but it's available and you can go explore. You can either, when you go there, you can either view the map or you can view the form where you submit problem reports. And you can also contact a local group or candidate, whether it's by phone or text or tweet or email. And our webpage that we're going to refer you to includes links with contact information for a bunch of organizations, but you may know of local organizations in your area that would want this information too. And it's, what happens in our election offices is all public information. So while we want to make sure that we're not creating alarm about situations that we may not understand thoroughly yet, it's not a secret what's going on. So whether you find issues or not, we'd like you to send a brief summary to any of these groups and to us at Scrutineers. So hearing from you will help us improve our training in the future, including things that confused you, or, somebody told me this was fine because XYZ. Do you think it was really fine or was it really a problem? And if you see a serious problem, the hotline at 866-OUR-VOTE, which is run by the Nonpartisan Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, is a good place to call. They are not as used to dealing with problems that happen after Election Day as before Election Day. And there's some attorneys who are working on changing that for this year. So they should be able to put you through to somebody who can help you. And they may be able to provide legal guidance, or in some places, they might even be able to dispatch a lawyer to the site. And this is a free service. So now I want to go over with you a scenario so you can imagine what you would do if you encountered a situation while observing. Suppose you've been seeing pairs of people, pairs of of poll workers bringing in containers of ballots to the counting facility. Once inside, they set the containers on a table where others process them. So like I said before, that's the flow, right? We're observing this is a pattern and everybody's doing the same thing. Then you see one or two people bringing in a similar box or container and setting it down in the corner and walking out. So a disruption in that pattern. You watch it for a few minutes and it just stays there. What do? You might do more than one thing, but what would you do in that situation? And I'd love for you to type your ideas of what you would do into the chat. And give you a moment to do that. So again, the pattern is pairs of people bring containers of ballots, set them down on a table where workers process them. Then you see one person come in with a similar container, set it down in the corner of the room and leave. What would you as an observer do? This might be putting you on the spot too much. Okay, who would scream and run out the door? Anybody? Okay, take a report and talk to a poll worker. Ashley, thank you. So take a report, put it in your notes, talk to a poll worker so the poll workers are probably the folks that are coming in with the ballots and leaving, but an election worker, somebody who's working in that room, yes, talking to them would be really important. I think those are the top two things to do. Asking the other observers to take notes so you're not the only one who saw it would be another thing. And then here's kind of my advanced answer, which is I would want to know what identifying labeling is on that container that might say where, like what polling place it came from, which could be a seal number or it could be another kind of label. So I would be really tempted to walk over to that container and write that stuff down, but I wouldn't want anybody to think I was the one who put it there or that I was tampering with it. So I think what I would do is go to one of the workers in the room and say, did you see that this happened? Let's go over there together and write down the seal numbers that are on that and get them to walk over with me and do it. I think that would be my approach. So I want to talk now about how to prepare to observe. The rules about who can observe vary from, and what you can see actually vary from state to state. Most states allow nonpartisan observers, but like I said before, some states only allow representatives of political parties or campaigns to observe. And some states may have other limitations, like having to live in the county where you're observing, or having to be a registered voter, having to be over 18. And some jurisdictions may also let you observe remotely, like having a video feed set up that you could watch from home. And generally speaking, this is not as good as observing in person. There are some exceptions to that, however. Sometimes they make you stand back pretty far where it's hard to see what's actually going on, say, on a computer screen, but they might have the video set up for observers to be able to see what's on the computer screen. So if there is remote observing available where you are, you might want to take a look at it from home if you have internet access, and so that you can compare it to what it's like to be there in person. So on our site, we'll give you a link to this map where you can click on your state to see what the rules are in your state. And the reason a few of these are gray is because the rules are not clear everywhere. And one of the things you may find out is that you need to sign up in advance to do this observing, and we're cutting it close now. So if possible, I would say do this today or tomorrow to find out if you need to, say, get certified by a party to observe for them. And actually, if that happens, you may find it difficult to reach people in the Democratic or Republican parties, but you might be able to reach one of the smaller parties that has candidates on the ballot, and they might be happy to have you observe for them. You don't necessarily have to be registered with a party to observe for them. So be creative in your approach if you're in a state where you're required to be certified by a party. So if there are other initial steps you need to do, try to do them as soon as possible. And so what we recommend that you do is use this map linked to from our website to find out the state rules, and then also go to your local election website and look for any local law regulations or rules that you need to follow, or perhaps call them to see if there are, if they don't have anything on their website, call them to see if there are local rules about observing. Again, we want you to find a buddy to observe with you if at all possible. Even just having one other person there will help you feel supported and give you someone to talk with about what you see and compare notes and, you know, keep watching while you run to the bathroom or whatever. And you can refer to them to watch this training or read the transcript if they have time. We'll want you to find your local election office website, like I mentioned a moment ago. So in most cases, you could just do a search online for election office and the name of your county. And the exception to that is if you live in any of the New England states or Michigan or Wisconsin, towns and cities run elections, not counties. So you'll want to look at the election office and the name of your city or town. And then so as I mentioned, you'll want to find their rules for observers and the schedule of activities to observe. And if that schedule is not posted yet, it really should be by now. We're so close to the election. So I would give them a call and ask if they have a schedule of what's happening when and of the activities that can be observed. And then if they use social media, follow them to get updates or sign up for emails so that you can get updates if there's a change in schedule or that sort of thing. The activities in different states during this post-election period can include things like determining which of the provisional ballots and vote by mail ballots are valid and have to be counted. Offices may also copy over any ballots that are torn or for other reasons can't be read by the scanners that count the votes. And some states also check or audit some of the election results by hand to catch computer mistakes and ensure that the computer counts are accurate. So we would love for you to observe as many of parts of the process as you can. And we have actually on our website some information about what we think are the highest priority things to observe. And then we also have a list of what we would recommend that you bring with you. Observing after the election is one of the most underused tools in the election protection toolbox. This work can be really rewarding, and honestly, it can also be boring. It's kind of like playing outfield in a baseball or softball game. Most of the time you're standing around not doing much, but you have to pay really close attention because every once in a while, there's a moment when you taking swift and decisive action can make a huge difference. And I want to credit a woman named Patty Whipfler with that metaphor, who actually used it in a parenting teenagers workshop that I went to years ago, but I think it applies here as well. And if you've never observed before, you will learn a lot, even if you can only go once for a couple of hours. You can decide how deep you want to dive into learning about the different processes involved in processing and counting votes. And if the outcome of an election, even if the outcome of an election is announced right away, those results are not final until all the steps are complete. And that in-between time is crucial. And so it's important that we be there to help make sure it goes well. More public oversight of our elections is a powerful way to increase voter confidence in the elections. So I have another thing I'm going to ask you to type into the chat, which is on a scale of 5 to 1, with 5 being definitely and 1 being definitely not, how likely are you to observe after in the time, in the days after this coming election? So you could just type the number into the chat. 5 being I definitely will observe, and 1 being definitely not, or any number in between. We've got a 3 from Diana. Anyone else? 3.5 from Ashley. And all the times I have delivered this training, I have never had a 3.5. I guess often I use the polling tool, so that's not even an option, but I enjoyed that. Thank you. Anybody else? So even for those of you who didn't, who only answered in your own minds, I have a follow-up question that's showing on the slide here, which is, why wasn't your answer a lower number? You could have said 1. Why didn't you? And if you are comfortable typing that into the chat, that would be great. Diana says, I feel as if I need to recruit a buddy before I commit. So that's why your answer wasn't a higher number. Why wasn't it a lower number? And I hear you about the recruiting a buddy. It looks like a simple process. Okay, well, thank you. So in just a moment, I'm going to give you a link to find all the resources mentioned today. But first, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about Scrutineers. As I mentioned before, Scrutineers is a nonpartisan online community of people who care about fair elections and want to help make elections more transparent and more accessible and more secure. Scrutineers members, we're just over 1,000. I think we have something like 1,013 members, work in their own communities all around the US and also help out often from their home in hotspots around in other communities. And inside our membership site, members share information with each other and attend or watch videos of trainings on things like the different types of voting systems that are in use and what their vulnerabilities are and how to advocate for change and all sorts of related topics. And we sometimes have special events for members and lots of opportunities to get involved and make a difference. So our most recent special event for members that we had was a couple weeks ago when we had about a half dozen or so really experienced vote count observers come tell stories about things that had happened when they were observing. And that's now available in our training library in our website. So if any of you decide to become members, it would probably be really useful to watch that video before you go and observe. So the membership site is designed to be a place where people who care about fair elections can learn, connect with each other, and take action. Can I have the next slide? And take action to make elections fairer and more transparent, more accessible, and more secure. And we in the 2020 election only provided training inside our website and inside our membership site. And this year we're doing an experiment of making this training and all the related materials about vote count observing available on our public website as well, so that you can do this, you can learn everything that we have to offer about this observing without becoming a member, and yet we hope that you'll choose to become a member. And it really can make the difference between feeling like you're out there on your own doing this thing that's new and sometimes uncomfortable, or feeling like you're in a community of people doing the work together. Fighting for the freedom to vote is really hard work, and it's much more powerful and more satisfying to work in community. So I want to encourage you to join the community at scrutineers.org. It is a paid membership, though it's the lowest cost paid membership for anything that I've ever heard of. We don't charge a monthly fee, we charge a one-time fee of $1.99. And the reason we do that is simply to keep bots out of our site. And if that payment is a problem for you for any reason, let us know and we will work it out. So again, it's not required to become a member of Scrutineers to access the rest of the materials we have for you, or to do this observing, and we would absolutely love to have you as a member. Also, if you become a member, you can reach out for a buddy in your area and might find one from within the community. So Diana, you've already joined Scrutineers, so you could post and ask if anybody wants to observe with you in your area, and we'll help you find people. So we have the recording of this presentation, or a previous version of this presentation, and the transcript and the other materials that I've referred to. And you can access them by going to scrutineers.org/train1, and I'll put that into the chat so that you can just click on it. At the bottom of that page, this is important, at the bottom of that page, there's a form that you can fill out and that will get you access to more resources. So we've tried to keep this first page simple so it's not overwhelming. Some of the resources that I have mentioned today are available there, but some of the things like the training about materials about specific procedures that you might be observing are on another page. And to get access to that, you need to submit your information. Because you signed up through Democracy Initiative, we actually don't have a way of contacting you again unless you come to our site and fill out this form. So I want to encourage you to do that. That way we can let you know as we update materials, we can follow up with you. We also have a series of reminder emails that you would get starting the day after you sign up, where it kind of checks in with you to make sure that you've done the things that are necessary to prepare to be ready to observe next week. So we are not going to be coordinating volunteers. So people often said to us after watching this training, where do I sign up and how do I find out where to go? We're a small national organization and we don't have the bandwidth to like coordinate shifts of who's going where, when. But we will be able to, like I said, send you reminders and follow up with you. So we really want you to complete that form to let us know where you're planning to observe. And then as soon as you fill that out, we'll give you access to the more advanced materials. Before we move on to any questions you have, I would love for you to share in the chat. I'll try this one more time. Something that you learned today, something that surprised you, or something you want to remember. So here's a little reminder of some of the things we talked about. The reasons to observe, most important reasons, are to catch mistakes and get problems corrected, and to protect workers from false allegations. And then we are encouraging you to report serious issues to election staff, to the CSA 2022 and the 866 Our Vote hotlines, and in some cases to candidates, parties, or other election protection groups. Would anyone like to share something important you're taking away from today's training? So one final reminder, which is that, again, we strongly encourage you to get the schedule of activities that can be observed in your county. And then take a look at that, take a look at your calendar, figure out when you can go and what will be happening on those days. And then look at our training materials related to those activities that you'll be observing. That will help you understand what's happening and what sorts of problems are most likely to occur. So just like today, we talked about what could happen, what to look for. We do that with each of the other procedures as well on our website. So thank you so much for attending today, and thank you to Ashley and Diana and Democracy Initiative for hosting us. Those of you who are, I know some of you may be leaders of other organizations. If you would like to share this training with your organizations, we can make that available for you to do. It's even on our end, not too late to present it like we did today. So feel free to reach out to us through our website if you're interested in that, or if we can support you in any other way. And thanks to Lynn Suram for running the slides. She's a scrutineer who is one of our great volunteers. And a special thanks to those of you who are making plans to observe. We look forward to hearing about your experiences and hope to see some of you inside our membership site. So thank you again so much for being here and for hosting us.
Thank you so much, Emily. And thanks, Lynn. And I hope folks learned a lot, and I hope they enjoyed it. And I hope they become scrutineers. And
Should we
also,
see if anybody has questions?
does anybody have any questions?
We have a quiet group today.
Yeah, questions still might come up. Okay. All right, Emily and Lynn and everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.